If we try to honestly answer the question of what remains after a person, without relying on familiar formulas, it quickly becomes clear that standard answers do not truly satisfy us. We speak about achievements, about leaving a mark in history, about influence on other people, about children, about knowledge passed on. All of this sounds correct, logical, and socially accepted. But if we pause and look deeper, there is a feeling that something essential is missing. Because all of this is only the external manifestation of life, not life itself as an internal structure. The problem is that human beings are used to describing themselves through results. We measure our significance by what we can present: projects created, texts written, decisions made, influence exerted on others. But a result is always the final point of a process, not the process itself. It is a fixed state taken out of context. It is like preserving an answer while losing the question and the logic of reasoning that led to it. Strictly speaking, a human being is not the sum of their actions. A human being is the system that produces those actions. This is a much deeper level. It is a way of thinking, a structure of perception, a logic of decision-making and behavioral patterns formed throughout life under the influence of experience, environment, and inner characteristics. From the perspective of cognitive science, personality is a dynamic system of information processing. It constantly changes, adapts, and refines itself. A person does not exist as a static object. A person exists as a process. And it is this process that we truly call the self. But here we face a fundamental limitation that humanity has lived with throughout its entire history. We have learned to preserve results, but we have not learned to preserve the process. We can pass on knowledge in the form of texts. We can leave behind videos, audio recordings, and artifacts, but all of this captures only the surface. It does not allow interaction with the thinking system that stood behind these results. When we read a book written by an outstanding person, we gain access to their thoughts, but not to their thinking. We cannot ask a clarifying question. We cannot see how they would change their position in a new context. We cannot understand how they would react to a situation they had never encountered before. We are dealing with a frozen form, not a living system. And this is the key problem in transferring experience between generations. We pass on knowledge, but we do not pass on the way to apply it. We pass on information, but we do not pass on logic. As a result, every new generation is forced to rebuild its own system of thinking, going through mistakes, uncertainty, and the search for answers all over again. On the one hand, this is a natural process of development. But on the other hand, it is an enormous loss. Because with every person, a unique configuration of experience and thinking disappears, one that could have been useful to others. What disappears is not just a set of knowledge, but a way of structuring, interpreting, and applying that knowledge. And if we are completely honest, this is where one of the deepest human needs lies. We do not simply want to be understood during our lifetime. We want our understanding of the world not to disappear with us. We want to leave behind not only a trace, but also the possibility of continuation. The possibility that our experience will not simply be read, but lived through by others through interaction. For a long time, this need had no technological answer. It remained within the realm of philosophy, religion, and cultural practices. But with the emergence of the digital environment, the situation began to change. Because for the first time in history, we gained the ability to record not only the result, but also the process itself. Every action a person takes in digital space is not just a fact. It is an element of behavior. Every message is not just text, but a reflection of the structure of thinking. Every decision is a manifestation of inner logic. And if we look at all of this not as a collection of separate data points, but as a system, it becomes possible to see patterns behind them. This is the principle behind the time capsule approach. We proceed from the idea that if personality is a system, then it can be analyzed. If thinking has a structure, then that structure can be identified. If behavior follows patterns, then those patterns can be reproduced. But the key goal here is not to preserve a person in the usual sense. The goal is to preserve their experience and knowledge in a form that remains available for interaction. This is a fundamental point. We are not simply talking about passing information on to future generations. We are talking about creating the possibility of dialogue between generations, a dialogue that was previously impossible. A person of the future would not merely read a text written by someone from the past, but interact with a model of that person's thinking. They could ask questions, receive answers, understand the logic, and see how that person reasons in a new situation. In this way, experience stops being static. It becomes active. Knowledge stops being an archive. It becomes a tool. And this is one of the key goals of the project: to create an environment in which human experience is not lost, but continues to function and bring value to future generations. Technologically, this is realized through the formation of cognitive models. We analyze a person's behavior, their decisions, and their interaction with information, and based on this, we form a structure that reflects their way of thinking. This is not a copy of personality in a superficial sense. It is a reconstruction of its principles. Such a model is capable not only of reproducing already known answers, but also of generating new ones within the logic that was characteristic of the person. And this is exactly what makes interaction possible. Descendants receive not just a legacy in the form of texts or ideas. They receive access to a system that can help them think, analyze, and make decisions. And if we look at this more broadly, it becomes clear that this is not only about technology, but also about a new form of responsibility. Because the ability to leave behind not only a result, but also a way of thinking, changes a person's attitude toward their own life. A person begins to realize that their experience can become part of a broader system, part of a continuous flow of knowledge. And then the question, what will we leave behind, stops being abstract. It becomes practical. We can leave behind mistakes, or the experience extracted from them. We can leave behind chaos, or structured understanding. We can leave behind fragments, or a system. Time Capsule is a tool that makes it possible to choose the system. And if we summarize it, it will not sound like a beautiful phrase but like a fairly precise statement. In the past, what remained after a person were data, memories, and interpretations. Now there is an opportunity to leave behind experience and knowledge in a form that can be interacted with. Not merely to pass them on, but to make them alive. To make them continue working, helping, teaching, guiding. And perhaps this is exactly what human beings have always been striving for, to leave behind not only a trace, but a continuation of their understanding of the world. Not what we did, but how we learned to think. And to give those who come after us the opportunity not to start from zero, but to rely on this experience, interacting with it as if it were still nearby.